to keep the party going, I'm actually going to introduce my friend and partner, Geoff Moore, who doesn't need an introduction, but many of you know, legendary speaker about transformation, author of Crossing the Chasm and Zone to Win, and helped many, many companies, including many folks out there, work through their transformation. And Geoff and I are going to lead a talk talking about transformation, transform your companies and transform your customers. And we're going to have a special guest as well. So welcome, Geoff. Thank you.
That's the way it is. Come on.
Awesome, buddy.
Cool.
How you doing, man? You coming here?
Oh, okay.
Good to see you.
Okay.
How's it going, man?
Very good. The rap was, it's you.
It's me?
It's
it
you.
works?
It's
yeah,
you.
exactly.
It's you. Perfect.
My wife was pretty happy to not be here, so yeah. Awesome. What is your go-to rap song, by the way, Geoff?
Probably, I'm the wrong demographic.
Okay, all right. We'll come back to that later. All right. All right. So we have an exciting conversation planned because for folks that don't know, I've been so fortunate to be collaborating with Geoff for about the last year.
Yeah.
We actually brought Geoff on as an advisor and consultant to help us with our internal transformation and growth, but also with the community and thinking about how customer success can be kind of part of a transformation strategy. And it's been pretty fun, right?
Yeah, it has.
You've been to a lot of these events. You've spoken at a lot of these conferences. You met a lot of people.
The first one.
Yeah, he was at the first Pulse
Yeah,
too, by the way.
right.
So it's awesome. And what are you hearing from the community?
Well, so, I mean, I think you talked about crossing the chasm. I think particularly in any business model where a customer defection creates a leak in the boat, customer success is clearly now the pragmatic thing to do. And so it's obviously very, very strong in SaaS and those places. But as you see business model after business model convert to a services component, it's just that sucking sound is customer success being pulled into the mainstream.
That's exciting. So talking about that, I think we have a great guest that we're going to welcome on stage, right? And I believe you know Beth as well.
Yes.
Awesome. So you've done some work with GE. So Beth Comstock, I'm excited to welcome Beth Comstock to the stage. Beth is a change maker and is releasing her first book soon. Most recently, she was the vice chair leading innovation at GE. She shepherded organizations through huge transformations, including the green energy transformation at GE, embracing on-demand and streaming through Hulu at NBC, and driving the digitization of manufacturing at GE. I'm really excited to welcome Beth Comstock. Beth, thank you.
How'd you take the medal? Go ahead.
Good to see you.
How you doing?
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Welcome, Beth. This morning kind of been surprising for you? What's it been like for you?
It's been great.
Yeah, awesome.
I'm not going to try to challenge you in rap, though.
Okay, well, you do
You
have
got it.
what's your go-to karaoke song?
My karaoke song, I'm embarrassed to say, but it's Build Me Up Buttercup.
I love that song. That's
I
a
do
great
too.
one.
And Start Me Up from the Rolling Stones.
Oh,
And
wow.
I'm trying to prove my cred.
You're going to be on the stage next year again.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Very exciting, Beth. Well, so honored to have you here because for folks that don't know, Beth is a legend at GE. I spoke to some of your former teammates and employees, and everyone said Beth is one of the most amazing people that they've ever worked with.
Talk to my mother.
I talked to your mom. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I did my research, right? And they all said she's been not only amazing at driving transformation at GE, but also being an unbelievable mentor to just so many people.
That's good to hear. Thanks.
On behalf of all those people. Thank you for everything you do.
Thank you.
And great to have you here. So I'm excited to actually talk to both of you about this idea of digital transformation, because customer success in many companies is sort of part of that digital transformation narrative, either in the company, customer success is part of digital transformation, or at their customers, it's part of that. But what the heck is digital transformation? We use that term all the time. What does it actually mean?
Yeah, it's the buzzword everyone's looking at. But I think the thing is it's really transformation brought about by the just rapid acceleration of digital technology. But if you're a digital-first company, you're also looking at incredible transformation. Don't think you're immune if you're a software or digital company. More and more digital companies are having to figure out, how do I do this in the physical world? So to me, it really is about how do you navigate change? How do you be constantly ready for what's next?
That's awesome. Geoff, what do you think? How do you think about the term digital transformation?
Yeah, obviously it's a banner, but I think it reflects the fact that we've been through, by the way, we went through a digital transformation in the 20th century in the supply chain with all the ERP stuff. This one's based on the fact that cloud computing has basically made global computing an OpEx expense that you don't need to raise capital for it. And mobile computing means you can communicate with 1.5 billion people for free. So that re-engineers every single business process on the planet in order to take advantage of that new infrastructure. but we all in this room live with an infrastructure that was designed in a prior era. So the transformation to me technically is how do we onboard that free resource and re-engineer all our processes? And then the human challenge, which Beth has been in the middle of it, is how do you get an entire company to change its orientation toward the new infrastructure?
And to that point, I think the real issue is it's a mindset shift that we're having to face into. It's our culture. We all have to change together. There are tools and frameworks that help us, but if we're not looking at moving our whole culture, we're not going to succeed.
Well, that's an awesome bridge, because I think that's one of the hardest things for companies is driving that change inside a company. And so I'd love to hear, I think you have some tips that you've prepared on like what you've experienced in driving change. Maybe we can put them up and...
Well, a couple of thoughts. I mean, I think when you're looking at a big organizational change, there are a couple things to think about. One, I think, as I said, it's mindset shift. It's about empowering the teams you work with to test, to learn, to go out and explore. So you're giving people permission to go discover. The other thing you're doing is you're all together looking at your set of opportunities. I do have a couple of slides here that I thought might be helpful. I mean,
put Beth's slides up, that'd be great.
To me, it's about getting to get your culture to be change ready. It's getting the whole system ready for change. And one of the things that I found very helpful is just looking at what you're doing in a simple three-box, really just looking at 3 boxes. What are you doing now? What are you doing next? What are you doing in the future? The reality is that most of what every organization is doing now is essential. It's critical. 70% of your resources, your people, your time needs to go there. And don't forget, you still have to innovate in your core. About 15% of your energy, your time needs to be figuring out what's next. And you still need about 5 to 10% on what's new. The reality is there are different people in your organization who can do this differently. Not everybody is good at everything. I find this framework incredibly helpful for me as a person and for the teams I lead. I was thinking about sitting in your shoes as customer success leaders. I think this is a way to think about how you're mining and working with your customers and what they're doing. You've got your core set of customers. You've got those where you're applying new applications, trying to figure out how do you develop that. And then you've got that new suite of potential opportunities that you're constantly looking for. Make room for it. In every team I've worked with, we make sure we have 10% of our budget, our people focused on innovating the new. If you go to the next page, I thought just real quickly, I won't go through this too much because there's a lot on here, but when you go into that new bucket, really you're thinking much more like an entrepreneur, like a venture capitalist. You're constantly testing and learning before you decide to scale. One model I found really helpful is this idea of your new team is your test team. And when they validate it, you send it over to the next and the new, the next and the now to continue to get it to scale. On this page, there's just 3 questions the 3 sets I'd like you to look at the bottom. You're asking different kinds of questions. In that early seeding stage, you're asking, not can we do this, should we do this? You're putting your money to work in different ways. You're putting a lot less money to validate a lot more ideas. Finance teams love this stage because you're getting more for less. The middle stage is really you're starting to launch. This is starting to say, can I get from one customer to more than one? Will anyone pay for this? The last piece is really what we know more in traditional bigger companies, which is how fast and how can I get to break even? But I think those kind of questions help. If you go to the last page, really, as I said earlier, you're trying to get your culture to be about a culture of test, learn, and empower. I love these kind of questions. To me, your job as a team leader is to ask your team different kinds of questions. My favorite one is, what's your hypothesis? You don't always know the answer in the middle of change. In fact, you rarely know the answer. You're on a journey to figure it out. Asking who is your customer. Just because you think it's your customer, it may not be the right customer for what you have. I love this idea. What problem are you solving? We had to shift our head at GE from total addressable market to total addressable problem. Problems area for customers, you have to do segmentation. And 2 more questions on here I love. Ask your teams, what did you learn? Not, what did you do wrong? What did you learn? How do you know? And then feedback is critical. If you're empowering your team, you're constantly asking them, what did you learn? What did you do? What can we do better? And my favorite one for a humble leader, you talked about humility, is tell me one thing I don't want to know. guarantee you're going to find out a lot you need to know.
That's awesome. Very practical as well. Jeff, any reactions? I know you have some frameworks that you'll share as well on this.
Sure. No, I think this is huge. I'm just going to save the last one. Tell me one thing I don't want to hear.
Yeah, you usually don't. This is the way I found it happens. You'll get a team, you'll say, okay, I had a group I called the Culture Club, and it was all, let's change our culture. And we have to do it together. It wasn't just that I loved Boy George. It was, in fact, most of them were so young they didn't know who Boy George was, but it was this reality of, we got to change the culture together. You have to hold me accountable, and I have to hold you accountable, but it's about trust and telling each other the truth. Yeah. And this idea of tell me what you don't want to hear. In the beginning, they'd tee up the nicest person, and they'd say, well, they treat you gingerly, and it's up for you as the leader to say, no, that's not tough enough feedback. Exactly. Give it more, make it harder. I've got to react, hold me accountable. Yeah.
I love that. Well, let's talk about a couple stories. So first, you were involved in the amazing work that GE did with NBC and Hulu. Talk about that transformation. What was challenging? What was that like? What kind of changes do you have to drive?
Yeah, everything was challenging about it. I think it's like all of us in the middle of any change. You have what works. In this case, it was broadcast television. It was working pretty well. But suddenly this thing called YouTube had arrived, and we were panicked. Cats playing video? What do we do with this? We don't know. We're good. We don't know what to do with cats. And but you could see the trajectory. You could see that streaming video was going to happen. And so basically, we decided, we tried a couple of things that didn't work. We acquired a company that frankly got killed because of the internal fighting in silos. And we decided we needed to partner with another company, in this case News Corp, and we needed an entrepreneur to create a separate company to challenge us, what I call a challenger brand. So we seeded what became Hulu as sort of outside the mothership. This idea of the reality that Jason Kilar, the founder, had was to take anything he wanted from Fox and News Corp and leave the bad stuff behind. At NBC, we created this. We spent a lot of money on this video player. It was beautiful, except it stunk. It was really bad. Jason's like, I'm not going to take that. The mothership wants to say, no, I spent $5 million on that. You have to take it. But the reality is you have to give that new team the freedom, the empowerment, the agency to go, to not take the bureaucracy. There's a lot of tension that comes in those change systems, but I'm convinced that by keeping it outside the mothership, by giving them free access to take what worked, but yet the freedom to say that stinks, giving them funding, it meant we had to say to the core, you can't always have the funding. You're going to have to share with the new kids. So that was an example of something that I think worked quite well. I could point to a lot of things that didn't work. I'll give you one example. Was as we've been at GE seeding clean tech, clean energy. We put a lot of energy, if you will, into seeding battery storage. We did every classic thing that big companies do wrong. We threw too much money too early at too big a time at something we called Durathon battery. And we expected this business to be profitable and scale before we even proved the technology or had moved from one customer to two. And what happens in companies, you create something we called success theater, where people pretend like they're doing well, but they're really not. They find a few customers, but they're not getting more orders. And so before you know it, we had to write the whole project, the whole business off. $150 million later, you have to write it off and say, oh my gosh. And that what I showed you earlier is what came out of that ability to what we should have done was to build a small microfactory first, test it, get it out in the field, go from one customer to many, create more of an entrepreneurial team that knows how to do it. So those are a couple of examples. And I think that's what you're trying to do with your organization in digital change, in any change, is you're setting yourself up as a living lab of change. And so those are two examples. One worked, one didn't. But the storage example, you have to keep at it. We were right back in it, we launched a lighting business that became an energy management. We launched a solar business. So you have to keep working. And big companies lose patience. I think that's the message as you're pioneering customer success. You have to keep pushing for patience, milestone success, continue to fund only to the next level of success, but keep working it.
I love that. That's awesome advice. One thing that I think people deal with a lot in this change is also just the organizational change.
Yeah.
And you've seen a lot of organizational models of innovation, all that, and people in this room get reorged all the time. I'm sure somebody in the audience got reorged like today, like right now, right? It happens all the time. What have you learned about being at the top of a huge company, how organization either helps or hurts this concept?
Yeah, well, I think we're all, I don't care where you work. I mean, Geoffrey, I'd love him to talk a little bit on some of his models of organizations, but I think we're all in the shift of just huge, not culture only, but how we organize ourselves. Command and control is dead. There's a great book out this week called New Power, all about much more distributed power. I feel like the model that I see work and was a part of is much more mission-based teams, where you pull teams from different parts of the organization, different capabilities. Maybe you're aligned around your function or your deep expertise, but you come together around specific products, projects, customers. And you're really the leader of that team is leading by mission. You're setting out a brief. You're giving your team time to figure it out on their own, to make mistakes, to come to you when they need help. And your job as a team leader is really as a coach. You move from being a boss, I will tell you what to do, here's the checklist, to being a coach, to empower, to ask questions.
Yeah, I think when you're in this transformational world, it's very difficult to find the energy to transform if you come from the inside out. Because at some point there's just so much inertia to say, couldn't we just do it a little bit more the old way? But these two examples that Beth gave, you either are going to have a mission which gets you to your customer, and you say, look, I'm going to reorient my entire team or my entire company in a new mission, and we are all going to find places in our hearts to open up resources to act differently because we want to be in service to a greater good that's outside us. And that's sort of a team-driven mission. She also mentioned Hulu. The other reason the other kind of culture that can respond very quickly to change is to be terrified by a competitor. And all of a sudden, a competitor is creating an existential threat to your business model. And again, you're not changing because I looked at my spreadsheet and I think I can get a little bit more, performance out of adding this product line. You're changing because the world has said, if you don't change, we don't need you anymore. And so again, it helps, but I really think finding the external reference point for change as opposed to trying to look inside your own organization, sort of meditate your way to change. I think it really helps to have something outside of yourself.
To build on what Jeff said, I think looking at all of you and thinking the roles that you have, you are the epicenter of change in every organization. I take to heart that old Peter Drucker quote from the 50s where he said, without a customer, there is no business. That's been my sort of North Star as I've navigated a career of change. You are that epicenter. Without a customer, you have no business. And so the ability to navigate change with your customers and bring that customer change together with your company change is, I think, the defining job of business's future.
That's excellent. Well, that's a kind of good segue, because I think a lot of folks in this room have to drive that change inside the company and also at their customers. What are some of the individual skills they need to actually make change happen? So not just like this high-level theory, but some skills even individual like CSMs or account managers could build to drive change.
Well, I think you have to be open to discover. Right? You can't sit in your office. You can't just sit with your team. You have to go out. You have to go live with your customer. You have to go beyond the customer. You have to live beyond where your customers are to understand what's next. So you can't be afraid of going out and discovering, even going kind of weird, like going to things where sort of uncomfortable and weird and challenge what you know.
But you wouldn't wear a blue turquoise hat on a stage.
That would be going
not
too
involved.
far.
No, okay,
that would be
okay.
going way too far.
Okay.
But I think you're constantly challenging what challenges your perspective, bringing in people who are constantly challenging you and saying, no, you've got it wrong. So I think it takes a very confident leader to constantly say, what's changing? How do we know? I think you're asking questions. You're not telling people. You're asking your questions. You're setting up feedback loops. I think that's a defining element. I think that's what's so great about Gainsight and what you represent here. The feedback loops that we're all seeking to have, the ongoing giving anyone feedback, understanding at any moment where your customers are, having your employees tell you what you're doing with your customers, not just your customers rating you, but your employees saying how you're doing with your customers. Those are a few thoughts I have.
Yeah. I've not worked in large organizations like Beth, so as an individual contributor, I would just add, I think the things that when I'm most successful, it's when I've stapled myself to a problem that I think is really important, that really needs to get solved, total available problem, and then just not let go. And just say, I'm not going to let go. Until this thing is wrestled to the earth, I'm just not letting go. I'm going to be polite, but I'm not letting go. And I think the amount of power that you develop from that, because your power isn't about you. Your power is in the commitment you're making to make the change. And as you enlist other people who care about the same change, and you become very powerful in a way that does not require you to be egotistically powerful. It's just you're powerful because you're heading in a direction that the world wants you to go in.
And what you're pointing out, I think, is also critically important. You're creating what I call proof points, examples, right? The more you stick with a problem, you're able to point to something. You're not just making it academic. You can say, see, this customer, let's go together and learn directly from this customer. It's such a good point.
So we have time for a few questions on Slido, so you guys can try it out if you want and ask Beth and Jeff some questions. Feel free to put them up, and we can have the Slido app go up on the screen there. I'll ask one more while we wait for the questions. So Beth, you're writing a new book, which is very exciting.
Yep.
Jeff's written, how many books have you written, Jeff?
7.
7.
Daunting.
Yeah, I've been involved in one.
It'll be one for me.
It's going to be amazing, I'm sure. So tell us a little bit about the book and some of the psychological mindset aspects.
Yeah, well, I'm calling it Imagine It Forward. It comes out in September.
Calling it what? Say
Imagine It Forward.
Imagine It Forward.
And it really is what we're talking about. It's about our fear of change, our mindset, the mindset shifts that are required in organizations to kind of think through where's the future going, how do you put yourself in the line of change. And I've taken a tack to be very personal about it, share a lot of the things that didn't work, what I learned, the teams I worked with. So you might also call it a book that the subtitle, instead of being Courage, Creativity, and the Power of Change, it could be Failing Forward. So it's a lot of
That's my life
learned.
motto, by the way.
Is that right?
That's how I
Failing
live
forward?
my life. Yeah, exactly. Mostly failing, but yeah.
But forward.
Forward,
No,
though.
fail
Exactly.
forward.
No, that's amazing, and that's what I've heard from everyone that's worked with you is you have
That I fail a lot?
No, that you're amazing at supporting them, which is truly amazing. So let's do a couple questions on the Slido. So first question we have is, any advice for a company that's starting to expand globally? So let's say that this is, I'm guessing, a younger company that has a change which is specifically just actually going global. GE's probably the most global company in the entire world. So where do you start?
Well, one of the first things we did when we decided to go global was just to go live. As I said, you have to live in these markets. You have to go see for yourself. You need to send people there. You got to give yourself time. The second thing I'd say is find good partners. You can't do it all yourself, whether it's a channel partner, whether it's a product partner, whether it's some kind of other capability. I think those two things are critical in terms of globalization right now.
Just to add to that, what you can't do is outsource your global expansion. So Beth, the two things that Beth said is you got to go there yourself and partner. A partner will not make you successful. Partners help you fulfill demand, but they do not help create demand. So you have to be there. And so taking a part of your culture and transplanting it into the new geography, really important, because otherwise, whatever you create in that culture, it won't really be you, and it won't persist. It won't sustain.
The thing when you're going global is also you can't just take your global solution and think everybody in China wants it exactly the way you made it for Canada. It has to be in China for China, and then you have to take the best of you and adapt it to the best of China. Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of companies fail as well. They're like, we're just going to tell you the way it is.
Well, I think it's a good segue to one of the questions up here that's pretty high up floated, which is a very hot topic. The question is, one of the biggest change management issues is GDPR. Any insights on wholesale change in response to regulatory requirements? For those of you who don't know, GDPR, big privacy regulation coming out. Most people don't know what it is, but they're all scared of it, which is pretty funny. And I think it's a great example of like when there's a big government mandate, which I'm sure GE dealt with a lot of this, how does that drive change and how do you think about that?
Well, I'm encouraged. More and more governments are realizing they need to innovate, invent, create more collaborators. I just finished up a partnership committee I was on for the government of Australia, looking out the year 2030 and starting to understand that they need to make their regulations more adaptable. So I'd say one thing you can do is, I think often go to these government bodies early and say, we're driving change. Can you be part of an advisory board? Can you come in and help us think through some of the unintended consequences that we can think through together? That would be one thing that I have seen. I think governments increasingly are coming up with test beds for innovation and new products. So perhaps you could seek to be part of that, whether it's software, drone testing, it could be something in healthcare. I think that you're seeing more and more governments are looking at.
So I spend a lot of my time in the entrepreneurial community. I think there you have to go very slowly here. This is a game played by large institutional players, And so there's not, for a small company, there's not much of a prize of being going early. And so I think you just want to, because these things are going to change. Whatever the first round of regulations is, the second will be different and the third will be different. And so just be thoughtful about it. But what you can't do is blow it off. And I think right now we're having a discussion in our government this week about, I think the Valley in general thought, well, yeah, we can. And for a while we got away with it. And going forward, that will not be I don't think that'll be the norm.
One I think question here at the top is really good because it's very hard, which is you're in a company and your boss or your CEO is resistant or hostile to change. Hopefully this is not a Gainsight employee asking this question. It's anonymous there. But what do you do like as an individual, you know, and you've seen this, like how do you coach individuals on this?
Well, what are your choices? You persevere or you quit. I think
Yeah.
most people think about it that way. Most of us, I think, are in this room because we persevere. I think that part of it is, I'm a big believer you just have to keep coming back. Usually in the beginning when you have an idea, it's probably not well formed out. It's not as brilliant as you think it is. You need people to help you make it better. So I always recommend to go find people who are open to the change, create sort of a band of change makers, if you will, who you can sort of vet the idea, get it better, create some of those proof points I talked about. I met someone earlier at the breakfast earlier from Ariana from MailChimp, and she was saying she had been piloting something for a year and then took it to her boss. And it was so much more successful because she was able to say to him, look at what's worked, what
That's
hasn't.
interesting. Yeah.
Let's launch this. What do you think? I think when you just go and say, hey, change is coming, what are you going to do about it, boss? They're looking at you to go, I don't know. What are you going to do about it?
That's a really good point.
That was a great
Coming to the
example.
boss with half-baked ideas if they're not encouraged by them. You had something to say, Jeff?
Well, just I think, again, if you're trying to manage upward, it really helps to have an outside forcing function.
Great
So
point.
that's either a competitive threat, but I think in this case, a great customer. So, you know, you don't get listened to, but it's very, very hard for a leader of a company not to listen to a major customer. And so aligning with that customer and bringing them into the dynamic, I think really helps.
I'm going to close with the obligatory millennials question, which is every conference has a millennials question. So can you talk about the challenges of managing change specific to millennials?
Well, here's
By the way, are we millennials or no?
In mindset.
We
I
sort
think-
of are, right? Yeah,
I
exactly.
Think age is a state of mind.
I agree
You're
with
babies. Oh, I'm sorry.
Some really sobering data that's coming out from researchers. Just if you even look earlier than millennials, high school, college kids afraid to take risk. Culture's expecting them to be perfect. We talk about we're here in the heart of Silicon Valley entrepreneurism. It's actually not coming out of the schools and universities that we're seeing. So I think part of the challenge is risk-taking, is that we need to encourage more of that. We've got cultures that want to be figure-it-out kind of people, but also are a little uncertain of it. So I think those kind of opportunities where more team-based opportunities, you give people space reasonably to take risks, to figure it out, to incent them to do that. I think those are the kind of things we need to create for our workplaces.
100% agree.
Yeah. I mean, I think we all want to do the best we can. And so I think understanding what any given cohort of individuals is valuing and then saying, how do I align with those values? How do those values and my values align to achieve an outcome? And I think every generation has a different value center. And so coming off of your own value center with that whole set of assumptions and saying, look, I need to embrace the possibility of a different value center. What would that look like? I'm still going to be me, but I need to be me in relation to a new center.
And listen, feedback, listen. I'm big on feedback, but listen. If somebody's giving you feedback, what are you going to do about it? Millennials
What do I not want to hear?
Yeah, what do I not want to hear?
I love it. Well said. So thank you
Great,
so much
thank
to
you.
Beth.